This week on the Nittany Dispatch, we discuss Penn State offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki's intro press conference, players coming and going from the transfer portal, and everyone who is or isn't playing in the Peach Bowl. This week on the Nittany Dispatch. Hello and welcome to the Nittany Dispatch. I am John Sauber, Penn State football beat writer at the Center Daily Times. She is Audrey Snyder of The Athletic. And Audrey, it is Saturday morning, and it still feels like a continuation of what was a long Friday.
Yeah, this is the special Saturday record, John. It feels almost like it's a game day, even though it's not. But there are some bowl games today, NFL on today. It's just a weird pre-Christmas Saturday. But yeah, Friday, Penn State held their bowl media day on campus, which I think felt more like a rapid fire of player availability.
Yes.
James Franklin, coordinators, new OC was introduced. Interim coordinators, and then we saw some practice. Like, it was a lot condensed into a very long Friday. I know you have stories up at the Center Daily Times. I've got a piece up at The Athletic as well about yesterday. Be sure to check those out. Where do we even start, John? Where do we start with all of this? Because there was a lot.
Well, hopefully the listeners and viewers start by hitting that like button down below. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. That really helps us out. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star rating and review. That is also very helpful. But where we start today is, I think we have to start with Kotelnicki, right? Because the first impression was strong. Like, I immediately was kind of enamored with his personality. There was a lot more energy than the previous offensive coordinator.
It felt like, John, I'm going to say it. It felt like personality-wise, they hired like the opposite of Mike Yurcich. And I say that because as soon as Andy walked into the room, he hadn't even sat down yet. He was kind of like this booming voice, and he was like, "Hey, how are you guys doing?" And I was like, this is just not like Yurcich. Was very kind of cut and dry, buttoned up, did not show a ton of personality, wasn't always engaging with questions, really didn't. And I get it. Intro pressers are different, right? They haven't played a meaningful snap yet with Andy. So what the heck are we going to ask, right? That's difficult at this point. But yeah, I was like, okay, this guy's definitely got personality, got energy, which again, that was noticeable.
Yeah, he brought some juice, right? Like, he was
a lot of juice.
Yeah, he seemed like he wanted to be there, and he told the story about how he was a Penn State fan growing up because his mom brought home a helmet that was white with a blue stripe on it, and he would ram his head into trees and his siblings, which something that resonated with me, unfortunately.
Very relatable for you and him.
I was also an idiot when I was a child. But no, he talked about like what this meant to him and his family and everything, and like the storytelling aspect of what he was saying. Like, I kept getting caught up in it to the point that I would have my pen over my notebook, and I would just be kind of staring at him because I was listening, right? Like, and I forgot that occasionally needed to take notes.
He was a compelling, engaging storyteller. Yeah. Which is, again, not something we see often when we're interacting with coordinators, right? Like, I always say Manny Diaz, when we talked with him, there was that not bravado, but like just that sense of, this guy's been a head coach before, he gets it. He knows how to kind of carry himself, what to say. He's comfortable, right? He's comfortable in front of a crowd. I felt the same thing with Andy. Like, it felt like this was a guy that you'd want to sit and grab a beer with and just kind of shoot the breeze with. And like, you could hold what felt like a normal conversation with this guy. And I say that because so many people, and this is like all across sports, people that we cover, like, that's not how this works, right? They're afraid to say something wrong, or they're afraid to be too guarded. And I get that because you always have a camera in front of you. It's different. But Andy, to me, it did not come across that way at all, which jives with everything that I've been reporting to date, talking with his former players, people that have hired him, is that, yeah, this is just kind of a normal, so to speak, guy who has a big, kind of larger than life personality. He's quirky, which I think we also got a sense for that yesterday. Mentioned Ted Lasso and just kind of gave a blizzard analogy just kind of off the bat, which I know that got you right away, John.
Listen, I really wanted some ice cream yesterday after we left. I did not get it because, again, it was a very long day. But no, you mentioned, right, you talked to players, I talked to some, former assistant coaches, and, like, this was, I think, what both of us kind of expected, but it still
Mhm.
kinda catches you off guard because of how true it is, right? Like,
Yeah.
people had you mentioned that, he would sit down and get a beer with, he feels like someone you could sit down and get a beer with, like, one of his old assistants said that's, like, who he is, right? Like, and he can talk about things outside of football really easily because he's that intelligent, and, like, the intelligence, I think, comes out pretty quickly, right? You can tell,
Yeah.
how smart he is. But he talked about his offensive philosophy, he talked about, a lot of things, but again, the personality I think is going to matter here because you mentioned it feels like an opposites thing, right? Where like teams in the NFL do this all the time where it's like, oh, the defensive coach that we hired didn't work. The next head coach is going to be an offensive coach, right? Like I'm willing to bet that the Los Angeles Chargers, after firing
Yes.
Brandon Staley yesterday, who was a defensive coach, go out and hire an offensive coach. It's just kind of how this goes. This feels like that, but with from a personality standpoint, where there was an offensive coordinator who was not effervescent, if you will,
It's a good word.
in
Yeah.
Mike Yursich and was not really forthcoming. And then they hire someone who is effervescent and ultra forthcoming, even saying something that I don't know if he was supposed to say, right? In that Danny O'Brien and James Franklin will be coaching quarterbacks moving forward.
Which is
And
interesting. Yeah, the
yeah,
2024 quarterback coaching plan is 3 guys. Now, I think, John, that ultimately what this is Danny O'Brien kinda runs the room, right? Those guys love Danny O'Brien. We've heard a lot about that this year. Um, but he mentioned it's kind of a bit of an NFL setup where he will certainly be involved, but that's also the interesting thing with Andy is that his background, he's coached all these different positions, right? He was an offensive lineman growing up. He coached the tight ends at Kansas. He coached the running backs at Buffalo. He's coached the quarterbacks before. I know he did it at Whitewater. So it's like he's done all these different things, which I think you mentioned the intelligence piece. Like you're getting a guy who is really well versed in every level of offense, which I think is going to be super important. But yeah, I think James Franklin made an interesting point too, and he said like they had so many conversations before they made this hire, so both sides knew what to expect, and it almost kind of makes me think that with the last hire that there was a little bit with Yursich of like, hey, this is kind of what we expect, and the personality I just don't think jived with James Franklin at all, and so much of this these guys spend so much time together, right? And I think if the offense would have worked, these are things that you can kind of work around and get to know each other. But
right.
to me, the personality, and again, this is just from our sample size. We're not in the meeting rooms with these people, all these types of things. We're not out on the practice field with them every day. But it just never felt like a good fit to me, right? I mean, with Joe Moorhead, it was like big personality. Him and Franklin got along really well. Like you had that. To me, this is Shiraka, and again, it was different. It was COVID. We had limited interactions, but his
Yeah.
personality also to me was not like that over the top kind of outgoing, which that's the impression I got of Andy is that this is a huge personality. Players started to feel that. We asked them about that. Now, he is going to meet with them one on one. Kaytron Allen was saying that they're starting to do these like one on one meetings, but he's talked with Drew Aller a few times as well, which good because you need to right build that relationship as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and you mentioned the kind of lack of fit. I don't know if you caught this. James Franklin's last kind of quote in the press conference yesterday. I'm going to read you the end of this.
Okay.
He was talking about loyalty, and he was asked if he anticipates keeping the rest of the staff together once they hire a defensive coordinator, and he talked about how loyalty's big and everything. But the last thing he said, I thought was interesting. Because he seemed like he was done, and then he kind of came back and was like, let me say this too. The loyalty part too. Sometimes you make a change and people say, well, you
Mm.
made a change. I don't understand how you're talking about loyalty. My loyalty is to Penn State. My loyalty is to the players. My loyalty is to the entire staff. Sometimes you have to make a change for the loyalty of the entire staff and the entire team. So I want to make sure that doesn't come off as contradictory. Uh, I think over time that's worked out really well for us, and I'd like to continue doing that if we could. It feels like when he's emphasizing the loyalty to the entire staff part, that this is also an indication of where things were, right? Like
Yeah.
because he mentions the staff last when he's listening thing, but he then lists it again immediately, kind of saying that that is important too. And I think it's evidence of, maybe some of these assistants weren't feeling heard, right? Like they weren't feeling like their contributions were being either acknowledged or put to use. And the assistants I talked to that know Andy say that pretty much that is the exact opposite of the case with him, right? They always felt heard. They would always be able to go up on the board and present a play if they wanted to. He would then ask you questions, right? Like how, if the defense has changed, how would, what I mean? How would the play work out? But you always had a chance to essentially defend your thesis and go and try and volunteer things to put up there. And he would kind of play devil's advocate and make sure it was good. And he would implement it though, if it was something helpful. And that, again, based on
Yeah,
that quote, based on other stuff James said, does not feel like it was the case.
no, that's a good point, because as you started saying that, I was like, yeah, I do remember when he said that. It was bringing my memory back. But yeah, I mean, I think Jada, I will say, like, the way the Yursich tenure ended, right? The swinging gate 2-point conversion call.
Yeah.
You can't walk back in the meeting room, back in the facility the next day after you roll that out there in that moment in that game. And well, that's kind of where the whole thing ended, right? Like that was the final straw. And you talk about loyalty to the staff and doing the right thing. Yeah, you let down your defensive staff by allowing this to play out the way that it did. And you know what? Like we've rehashed it plenty of times. We won't get into it now. That this defense deserved better and all of that. But this is a clean slate, right? Like this is starting over. We saw it Friday on the practice field where Andy's kind of just standing there watching drills, observing, getting familiar with personnel, figuring out, watching how Penn State and how Franklin conduct a practice. But to me, the really interesting thing is going to start after the bowl game, right? Once that Peach Bowl wraps up, boom, you hit the ground running with this new offense, with this creativity, with this new energy, right? Like I think it just seems to me, and again, this is my reading, right? Like if we're doing a vibes check around this team, good vibes right now. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
that is they're upbeat, right? You've got a new fresh start. And I do think that matters. Drew Aller talked on Friday. I was at him briefly, left my recorder there, was talking to other guys. Was there anything that stood out to you from Drew and Andy? Or
Nothing major, right? He said, like you had mentioned, that they'd spoken a few times, and that he, you know what I mean, it was a good first conversation and everything. And that he had seen. I asked him if he like about the two quarterback stuff, and he said, he had seen the clips and everything. Talked about how like Bo just wants to help the team and everything like that. Like nothing revelatory, right? A
Mhm.
lot of stuff that you would expect a young quarterback. Well, I guess not even. He's going to be a junior next year.
Isn't that to me that is crazy,
Although
John.
he's still gonna be 20, like, he's still
Yeah.
19 right now. Like, he's not
Yeah.
like, this is I think he turns
In
20
February, I
sometime
think.
early.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I
No,
knew it was in the early months.
I was writing something this week and I was like, "Oh yeah, Kaytron Allen, Nick Singleton, Drew Aller, Abdul Carter." Like, wow, they're rapidly approaching their junior season. Like it just feels like it's gone fast. But I was talking
And
with
they
the
were the
running back.
class. They were
Yeah,
the
I
class
mean,
that's
that
supposed to
is
take them to the next level, and, like,
we're gonna find
eh,
out.
it's their junior year, right? Like, this is usually when these kinda things happen, so,
Yeah.
it's coming quick.
No, no, and I talked with the running backs yesterday, and the thing that I asked both of them was kind of what they knew about Andy to this point. And I guess when he was hired, Franklin on his PowerPoint had like put up some stats, right? About here's what he did at Kansas, kind of like the primer, get to know you type of thing.
Yep.
And but both of them were unaware until I told them that at Buffalo, Andy had two backs who each rushed for 1,000+ yards in one season. And so as I said that, both Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton, they both smiled and they were like, "Ooh, yeah, we like that, right? Like that sounds good." So again, these conversations, these meetings are going to be ongoing as they get to know each other. Um, John, is that is that good for our offensive? Do we get to the opt outs and opt ins and all of that mess now?
Yeah, we can do that because that was a large part of yesterday, much to James Franklin's chagrin, apparently.
A lot of
Uh,
housekeeping for us on Friday.
yeah,
Yeah.
I guess some people don't understand though why we have to ask questions that people want answers
Well,
for.
so here's the
Uh,
thing, right? So this time of year, and James Franklin even hit on it when he was asked about his schedule for the last 2 to 3 weeks. And he, which I think maybe is his quote of the year, he asked if about this, he was asked about his schedule and he goes, "Why are you asking because you're saying I look like shit?" And it's like one of those humorous moments. I didn't think you looked that
a
bad
very real
yesterday,
moment.
John.
I thought he looked a
Honestly,
little
I thought
tired,
in
but
season, he's looked worse. Like after Ohio State, Michigan, like those
yeah,
post
but
pressers, he looked.
those are after games, so you kinda expect it, like, in these, like, midweek or not midweek, late week,
Yeah.
like,
I
you
don't know.
know, I
I didn't
mean,
think he looked that bad for the record, but clearly the
I'm
guy's
glad
exhausted.
I'm glad no one was commenting on how I looked because I was, as you know, like, getting up that early is very early for me, and so I was
It
probably
was not
looking
even
as
early,
bad
John.
as
We
anyone.
started at like 10:30. It was not early at all.
It's
Um,
pretty early. I got up at,
but
like,
I
9:30.
do think when you look at kind of where this roster is, you have to ask. It is our job to ask players if they plan to be here next year, and if they plan to play in the bowl game. Like that's it. That's how the job works. I can tell you, and I know you and
Fans
I are on
want
the
to
same
know.
page. Fans want to know. We don't particularly enjoy asking the questions, right?
No.
The month of December is crazy for us too, right? I would love to live in a world where I wasn't tethered to my computer all month of December, wondering who's going to commit, who's going to decommit, who's going to enter the transfer portal, who's going to exit the transfer portal, who's going to play in the bowl game, who's going to announce that they're going to declare, but yet play in the bowl game or not play in the bowl game. I would love to live in that world too, but we don't. So it is
I'm
our job
getting
to ask.
I'm getting exhausted listening to you list those things off again.
So we started yesterday. Olu Fashanu was among the people who met with us. He has not publicly made a decision about his NFL future yet. Again, top 10 projected pick. I think we all know which way this logic points, but he has not made a public decision about that. He is still practicing here, and he said he does plan to play in the bowl game. Now, fans, keep in mind, we don't know what exactly that looks like in the bowl game. I would imagine it is some type of pitch count, right? Kind of like we saw with Saquon Barkley in the Fiesta Bowl. Plans to play. So that's notable. He also will graduate today, Saturday. He was very much looking forward to walking at graduation and said he's feels like he accomplished everything that he had hoped to, between getting that degree and being an All-American. So kudos to him for getting all of that done. So we got that decision. We knew Theo Johnson was going to play in the bowl game and then go to the NFL. He made that known. I think it was last week, maybe John.
It was
Sometime
at
in the
some
past,
point. Yeah,
some point
sometime
in
in the
December.
past 7 days.
So he's doing that. Tyler Warren told us that he is still working through his NFL decision. So again, to me, that's one of the more interesting NFL people potential on this roster. There's a decision to be made there. Of course, he's going to play in the bowl game, which is what you'd expect, right? Not a projected first round pick. You're going to play in the game most likely. Whew, boy, where else do we go after this?
Uh, Curtis Jacobs told us he hadn't made an NFL decision yet and that he would play in the bowl game. And then about 10 hours later, 7 hours later, something like that,
Friday
tweeted
night.
that he would be entering the draft, which is fine. I know these kids want to make their own announcements. That's perfect. I
Mhm.
like sometimes you wish, like, yeah, just tell us if you know. It's okay. But I understand they also want to make their announcement. It's their decision. At the
Yeah.
end of the day, it's not about us. It's about them and what they want. Uh, Devon Ellis said that he is playing in the bowl game and has not made a decision on next season yet. Taquan Hardy, I believe,
Mhm.
also said playing in the
He's
bowl
playing.
game,
Yeah.
no
No
decision
decision.
on
Mhm.
on his extra year of eligibility. I am going through the
Oh,
list in my
Adisa
head.
Isaac.
Adisa Isaac, yes.
Yeah, he said that he is playing in the bowl game and has not made a decision about his future, but I believe he already accepted a Senior Bowl invite for what it's worth, which again, that is not binding by any stretch, but like that's those invites are also going out now. Johnny
Yeah.
Dixon also had accepted it or has accepted a Senior Bowl invitation. Dixon was not among the group of players that was available Friday. I did not see him on the practice field Friday when we were there. Again, it was about a 15-minute viewing window. I did not see him. I did not see cornerback Kalen King, who was also not among the players who was available. Wide receiver Keandre Lambert Smith was on the practice field Friday. Lambert Smith was not among the people that we met with media wise to talk to on Friday. So no idea kind of what his future holds, but he was on the practice field.
Yeah, and we did not see Trey Wallace on the practice field, but he also hasn't played in some time, and
Yeah, he's been hurt for a while. Yeah.
that presumably is related to that and not anything else. I don't want to
You
like
know,
sound alarm bells.
great housekeeping time, and we can add to this. Kaytron Allen was asked if he plans to be here next year, right? Because
Yes.
the transfer portal is always there. You've got two very talented backs, two co-offensive MVPs, right? I believe that was the thing for the Penn State banquet, how they phrased it. He said, yeah, that he plans to be here, and it was pretty funny. He's kind of like, yeah, why wouldn't I be? And then I followed it up with, well, there is the transfer portal this day and age, right? So we
And I
know.
think that's
Go ahead.
where like I think James is frustrated because it's
Mhm.
like intimating like, "Oh, you should transfer." No, nobody is doing that. Like nobody
No,
is like hinting that guys should do this. Like we're all just asking to make sure because we see guys enter the portal like throughout this month, right? Like there have been
yeah,
guys that have entered the portal over the last week that like maybe you didn't expect, right? Like that I don't think
not from here. From here, it's been
yeah,
it's.
to be clear, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
they've done a really good job of retaining this roster and like making sure everyone is happy and keeping everyone happy. Other places that is not always the case. And so you see guys that are playing at a really high level enter the transfer portal. So I don't think just because someone has success at a good school means that they're going to go back to that school and continue their career even if they're successful, right? Like we're seeing
That's
this
not this
with
age of college football. It just isn't.
Trevor Etienne is the perfect example of this. He's really
Mhm.
good at Florida, and he's in the transfer portal. And I think the hot rumor is that he's going to end up at Georgia. We'll see how that goes. But like,
As James Franklin said,
it's
pampering is rampant these days in the portal. He's been consistent with that one over the years, right? That's kind of one of his. We've heard that line a lot. But you know what? Everybody says that. I'm sure it's probably true. I'm not denying that. But also hasn't been fixed, right? Like it is what it is. But yeah, I mean, to me, and he did mention kind of the calendar and how December it needs to be reformed. Like he believes it's unsustainable and that coaches want to get out of coaching college football because this month is so crazy. And he also made the point, which I think is a good one, is that you might be attracting kind of the wrong type of people who maybe want to get involved in college football because they see an opportunity there. Perhaps to maybe influence a player or say, hey, you can get more through NIL this way or that way. Jaywan Sider, when he met with us Friday, said that he doesn't know what the figure is, but he believes both Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen are being compensated well through NIL, but again, does not know what that figure is. And then he also made, which I think is a really funny but astute point, that he's like, yeah, you guys know them. You talk to them. You know that these guys don't want to be in front of a camera, right? That's the last thing that they want to do is want to be talking about themselves and promoting themselves through NIL. Um, so which again, that's the whole other piece to this. But to the bigger point, both backs are convinced or not convinced, both backs plan on being here next season, which is huge, which is something that we have to ask, get it out of the way. Which I remember doing this several years ago at the Cotton Bowl when they had the all the running backs, and I went down the row and asked all of them. And John, each and every one of them told me they planned to be here. Yeah, they were not. Ricky Slade left shortly thereafter that. I think somebody else even left that offseason. It is what it is. But yeah, there's just a lot of housekeeping that goes on this time of year. I think that's it. Or is there anybody else we are forgetting? Oh, we talked to punter Riley Thompson.
yes, and
That's the big
Stacey
one. Yeah.
Collins,
Mhm.
and found out that they were kind of just waiting for the NCAA process to play out. I feel pretty vindicated here. I posited that I
Take your
did not
victory lap.
understand, yeah, that why he wouldn't have 2 years of eligibility remaining. And it turns out he does have 2 years of eligibility remaining. And so he will be back for the 2024 season and presumably the 2025 season. It will be funny for him to have walked in 2023, not walk presumably next year,
Yeah.
and then walk in 2025. Uh, but yeah, no, this
He's
is big
also
for Penn State
23
special teams.
years old, John. He's
Yes.
23 already, right? Imagine that. You could be 25 years old and walking on senior day.
Yep. And I mean that's the case for a lot of
Yeah.
Australian punters,
Mhm.
right? Who come over usually after having spent some time in college in Australia or like at the age of 20, 21, 22. But it's big for Penn State, right? Because I think the specialist group was going to be a major question next year. This fills one of those two spots. Not quite sure how the kicker spot's going to be filled. That remains to be seen.
Well, yeah,
Uh,
and Stacey Collins did say that Sanders Hayek and Ryan Barker are striking the ball well, but that was all he said. He wouldn't really
yeah.
elaborate any more on that. So we'll see.
Stacey can be a man of few words at times. He is succinct and direct, which I
Oh, and he's
appreciate
also
generally.
also the linebackers coach now too, without Manny
Yes.
Diaz. There's that for the
Yes.
time being. Yeah.
Yeah, and presumably, well, actually, I don't want to presume anything, but Rob Smith is working with the defense now, and he has worked with linebackers in the past. It would make sense if he is also working with them. We don't know that for sure because no one really wanted to give us much info on anything about who is doing what on either side of the ball, except for Andy Kotelnicki, which I appreciate. Let's take a brief break from the podcast to talk about a place that you and I took a brief break at yesterday. And by brief break, I mean, by the way, I'm not going to say that ever again. That is too much alliteration. At Voodoo Brewing Company, though, in State College, located at 201 Elmwood Street, you and I, between press conferences and practice yesterday, made a nice little pit stop at Voodoo for a few hours, sat down, got the
Had
laptops out, did
lunch.
some work, had lunch, had some good conversations with Josh and Andy and Wes and all the good people at Voodoo. It was as it always is, right? Like they have great beer there. Did not have any beer
Hot
yesterday.
cider.
We were
Hot
Yeah, they had
cider.
hot
Let's make
cider.
sure we get that in there. I enjoyed my lunch, which was a pizza with pickles on it, John. Sounds kind of interesting. I like pickles, so I gave it a try. It was fantastic.
Yeah,
Highly recommend. You had something yesterday, right? You ate
yeah, the chicken cheesesteak. It was delicious, and it was the only thing I ate most of the day, which was incredibly valuable on a day
that's
that
a
long and
you
that
choice.
chaotic. Yeah, but they're always great there, right? Like, I mean,
Yep.
you and I sit down and post up and work when we need to, plug the laptop in and get typing away. They treat everyone great. It's obviously not just us. They're awesome down there. Obviously, if you'd like to go for trivia nights, they have that on Tuesdays. They have bingo night on Thursday night. Now that it's getting cold out, they have the space heaters or the fire pits,
Fire
excuse me,
pits.
outside to space heaters are this is higher level than that, of course. They have the fire pits outside to keep you nice and toasty and maybe have a hot cider out there, right?
Mhm.
It's a great time of year for those things. They are wonderful. They've been wonderful to you and I. We always
For
appreciate
sure.
them. That's Voodoo Brewing Company, located at 201 Elmwood Street in State College. Back to the show.
Well, but
Uh,
we do know that they're co-defensive coordinators now
yes.
with Anthony Poindexter and Rob Smith. Smith was the analyst who had been working with the offense last year. Previously was at Duke, and so we do know that there are co-DCs. But we only talked with one of them on Friday, and that was Poindexter. But there are co-OCs, and we talked with both of them on Friday, and they both, Ty Howell and Jaywan Sider, pointed at each other when asked who is calling the plays. It's a good moment.
Yeah, and they said it's an open mic, which I mean, we have no reason not to believe at this
Yeah.
point that they're just like not having conversation. I don't know how that works, and like how you have like a conversation that quickly on what to call, but I digress. We're never going to find out. It seems
Yeah.
exactly how this is working, which is fine. There's a new OC coming in, um, and that's going to be the main thing moving forward. Do we now talk about
The
transfer
defense?
portal
Oh, no,
and
I was gonna say
guys?
about Poindexter and the future and the DC hiring
I
timeline.
have
I wanna go there, John.
I have the worst feeling in the world that before we can even publish this, that like our Saturday is going to be ruined by this news coming out.
Hopefully not, but maybe. I mean, you never know. It's, wouldn't be the first time in December where we've had days, nights, weekends, plans torpedoed because of this wonderful, terrible schedule. But James Franklin said that, again, he would have liked to have had a defensive coordinator hired yesterday, right? The sooner the better. But he was asked about kind of his qualifications, what he's looking for in a DC, and he reiterated that while head coaching experience isn't necessary, kind of it's preferred, it's encouraged, right? And he made the point that you could tell with Manny Diaz that he had been a head coach before, and until you sit in that seat, so to speak, there's so many things you think you know about a program, so many ways that you say you would do things, but until you're that guy with all of it on your plate, you don't fully understand it. So when he said that you want someone who has experience calling a defense, but also someone with head coaching experience, if possible, in my mind, John, it kind of said, if you haven't promoted Anthony Poindexter yet, I'm not so sure he's your guy. Now, we could be wrong on this, but right now, it kind of seems like he's kind of working his options, right? Mulling all options.
Yes. And I think that feels like where this was probably heading, right? We talked about before how this It's just not great timing for hiring
Which James
Poindexter.
Franklin hit on hiring, right? Or on timing at one point yesterday. It made me think of this. He was like, yeah, like there could be people where at one point you didn't hire him and then, because we found out yesterday,
Yes.
which I thought was a
He
really, yeah.
this was my favorite thing that
Jaywan
came out of
Sider
this.
told us this.
Yeah, J1 Sider mentioned that when Ty Howell was hired as tight ends coach, Andy Kotelnicki interviewed to be the tight ends coach and didn't get the job. And Kotelnicki joked that Lance Leopold also didn't hire him the first time that he interviewed him or interviewed for a job. So he said something about making bad first impressions, which strongly disagree with. Made a very good first impression yesterday. But I do think like there's a funny dynamic of okay, Ty Howell and Kotelnicki interviewed for this job, the tight ends coach job. Howell gets it
2021.
and
Yeah.
has a leg up on Kotelnicki, right? And then 2 years later, Kotelnicki is now his boss and is the one in charge of all of this. I am sure they will have fun with this. But it is interesting, right? Like to see the kind of trajectory that Kotelnicki's been on. And I mean, this says a lot about just how successful they were at Kansas. But yeah, I think this is clearly a staff that's I think going to get along. I would say, right? Like
Mhm.
it feels like there was a good sense of humor about all of these things. But yeah, I thought like J1 Sider saying that it was one of those things where like my head was down. I think I was typing something or I was writing something, and like I immediately like looked up and was like, "Really?" Like, and it also felt like one of those things that maybe not everyone wanted said, which is fine by
Yeah.
me. But yeah, I
No,
thought
which
it
is
was
which
it
is
was a great
great.
moment.
Tell us all these things. No,
Yes.
I think there is a good point about this staff getting along, right? When Manny Diaz was introduced last week at Duke, he had said that the defensive staff had so much fun working together that he's like, it almost shouldn't have been allowed. That's the kind of culture that you should want in any workplace, right? It's easier to work places where you're happy, where you like the people you work with, where you want to spend time around them, right? Like that to me, that those are the ingredients that you want. That's the stuff that you can't necessarily replicate, and anytime you're adding a new person into that mix, you don't know how it's going to go, right? And maybe they interview well or they don't interview so well, but once they get in that job, what happens then is all that really matters. um, and so I do think the timing here with Poindexter probably isn't right, because also I thought it was a little odd that okay, if you're going this co interim defensive coordinator route, the fact that it's not just Anthony, that Rob Smith is, I get it. You want to kind of share the responsibility, but to me, that points to like Dex maybe is not your guy if this is what you're
But
taking right
also,
now.
Dex was the only one who talked to us yesterday. You know what I mean? Like Rob
Yeah,
Smith
I don't
wasn't.
understand
I
that.
don't.
And
I
they
don't.
were very adamant about not telling us seemingly that Rob Smith was doing this, right? Because James Franklin was asked
Yeah.
Monday about it, and he had the chance to say Monday, "Who's your interim DC?" and he wouldn't say it. So I don't. Yeah, to me, the Rob Smith thing. But Poindexter was asked, do you want this job? Are you interested?" And he's like, "Yeah, of course. It's Penn State." He said he's had multiple conversations with Franklin about it. So we will see. He will continue to be in the booth for the bowl game, that's where Poindexter usually is anyway.
Yep.
Kotelnicki, for those who like to keep track of these things, he will be calling it also from the booth in 2024. That's where he's always said he kind of feels most comfortable doing that.
Said all but 3 or 4 games. I think he's been in the
Hmm.
booth for his career.
So that's kind of where those things stand. Yeah, we're kind of just in wait and see mode on the defensive coordinator search at this point. I did want to mention this, John, about Manny Diaz because I was asking, and I'm sure you did too, a lot of players about Manny's departure, and James
Yep.
Franklin said, you want to hire a defensive coordinator who's not intimidated by coming in here and saying, "Hey, you're taking over arguably the top defense in the country." Now, so many coordinators or so many people applying for this job are going to say, yeah, we're going to come in here. We're going to improve your defense. You and I talked about this before, John. Realistically, like this is either the ceiling or damn near close to it, right? What this group accomplished this year. So, how you figure out how to maximize and elevate that is going to be different moving forward. But what I thought was a nice moment in a sport where we often do not have many nice moments when coaches leave. I was asking Penn State players. I was like, when Manny leaves, like obviously they were really close. I mean, anybody who spent any amount of time around this team the last couple years could tell that there was something sincere, something genuine between Manny Diaz and these defensive players. Right, there was a genuine bond, a belief. They loved playing for this guy. So when he leaves, right, how do you handle that? Do you shoot him a text? Do you go look for him? Like, is he there? And Adisa Isaac said he was walking through the football building when everything was kind of really pointing toward Duke, and they're watching everything on social media fall out. And Adisa went to look for him, and he said, Manny wasn't in his office. And he's like, at that point, I was like, all right, he's probably gone to Duke. Maybe I'll never see him again. Devon Elise was like, yep, I was expecting that the next time we saw Manny, he was going to be walking off that jet at Duke, kind of with a Photoshop with a new logo on it, that type. And that was going to be it. And he's like, I was ready just to text him and be like, hey, coach, thanks for everything. But Manny Diaz did come back, and the players did have a chance to kind of thank him and say goodbye. He stopped by one of their bowl practices, they said, and that was a really special moment for the coach, but also the players. And that's something I wrote about on The Athletic, and they said there were some tears shed, and Manny Diaz thanked them and said that because of this group of players that he fell back in love with coaching football. I think you have to remember, the way everything went down at Miami, that the time at which, Manny Diaz got to Penn State, it was a tough time for him professionally when you kind of, look at that and the way everything fell out. So it was a very nice kind of storybook ending where Adisa Isaac was like, we are just super happy for Manny. Like, they knew he wanted to be a head coach. So you get that moment, which I think really speaks to the relationships. And when you are doing things the right way, right? And when you are building a program and you have that culture, right? There's a buzzword that we heard a lot of on Friday. You have that culture in place. These are the types of things that happen. A coach just doesn't leave in the middle of the night and never comes back. You have that. And that also, John, I wanted to mention, we were talking about the opt-ins and opt-outs, the culture piece to that. Theo Johnson said that before the season even started, he went to James Franklin and said, hey, whatever happens with me individually this year, like probably going to head to the NFL, like it's not a surprise, but whatever happens with me individually, I am playing in that bowl game. I am a team captain, and captains play. Captains don't opt out. That is a theme that seems to be resonating, right? I think that's why you have Olu Fashanu also saying what he's saying of like, hey, I'm going to this bowl game and I'm playing in it. We'll see what the role looks like. Same thing with Adisa Isaac. Like, captains don't opt out here, which is special. That's not the thing at every place. And again, that's not a slight to Chop Robinson, who is the only player so far who has opted out, and sounds like maybe will be the only one. Well, no, I shouldn't say that because we still haven't heard from some guys.
I was gonna say,
Yeah, no, I
I
shouldn't
would
say
not be
that.
jumping to that conclusion.
But that's not a slight to him, but just kind of the reality of, yeah, every situation is different. But if you're a captain here, there is that expectation that you play, or at least that you go to the trip.
Well, and I think a lot of these guys that have had major roles for a long time kind of feel that way, right?
Mhm.
Like Curtis Jacobs is another example of that, who, by the way, he was asked about what I think it was something along the lines of what he's going to remember most about Manny, or like how he, like what, uh, something along those
Yeah.
lines. And he finished answering the question, and I quickly interjected with, "It's not that he was smaller than you expected," which got a nice laugh out of him. And said he like definitely had a personality that outsized that, right? Like that he really was that kind of bombastic guy that like he's and you mentioned this, everyone talked about like it's way harder to replace that person than that, for as brilliant as
Mhm.
he is as a defensive mind, like the personality is going to be really hard to replace, which I think is going to be really interesting to see how they do that. But that's going to be true for a lot of these guys, right? Like Theo, you mentioned him being a captain and obviously playing in this game. That's all part of this, who he is, right? Like, and who he is as a leader. And he's an emotional, like very strong leader from every indication we've
Mhm.
gotten. They're going to have to replace that next year too, right? Like, yes, you do get guys like that for this game, but at the end of the day, there's going to be a leadership void again next season. And there was a massive one going into this year. And I think Theo stepped up into that role in a big way. They're going to need that voice again next year. And,
Yeah.
for as
It's
good
like, who
as,
is that guy? Yeah. Or who
right,
are
like,
those people? I don't know.
so, like, I feel fairly confident that right now, I don't think it will be anyone from the running back room, right? Like those guys are more. And Jay One-Side
Quiet.
said this
Yep.
yesterday. They're very quiet. On defense, like it doesn't seem like Abdul Carter's kind of a
Maybe
rah
Kobe
rah
King.
guy.
I think Kobe King could be
I
that
think
guy.
Kobe King. I think you look at Denai Dennis Sutton is a clear choice for
Mhm.
this.
He's
KJ
I was gonna say
Winston,
he's
who
still young, but he's also heading into that junior
I was gonna
season, so
say,
never
yeah,
mind,
right.
yeah.
Like all of these guys are gonna be juniors. KJ Winston, I think, is a guy who could step into that role too, if only because I think he might be their best or second best defensive
Mhm.
player next year. They have guys on that side of the ball. On offense, like think you might just be looking at some of the linemen stepping up, right, and stepping into like
Yeah, well,
bigger
and
roles because
we didn't.
Drew mentioned yesterday too that it is something that he's worked on. He feels like he's better at, but he knows he has to be a better, more
Mhm.
vocal leader moving forward. And so, like, what that looks like, I don't know, but I do think like he's right. That he has to be more vocal. He's got to be one of those guys next year. Otherwise, there's going to be that void, and they're going to be feeling everything out. And unlike this year, there's no like stretch of games early where you can kind of
Yeah.
get the vibe for the team and then start rolling. They're going to be deep in it pretty early on next year.
Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff that you can't just say, okay, this guy's going to be a leader, and here's why. Like it has to actually take place, and I think that's also kind of one of the cool things when you see somebody like a Theo Johnson. And so much of this past offseason was who are the leaders, who's going to step up, and now you look at it at the end of the year, and you're like, yeah, this guy did it, and he did it tenfold, and that's kind of they're going to need people to do that. And again, going back to Tyler Warren and his potential NFL future, that's somebody else that again could help with that leadership piece a little bit. But yeah, I mean, there's gonna be more roster changes to come. That's inevitable. It's not a sign that the sky is falling. It's a matter of, hey, players want to do what's best for them. If the NFL they think is right for them at this time, they're going to do it. We did not hear from Caden Wallace or Sal Wormley on Friday, which again, those are also guys that have a sixth-year COVID year if they want it, could be back. They haven't said one way or the other what they're going to do. They've been asked about it, to be clear, but they
Yes.
haven't said. So we're on high alert for all of these graphics that can be coming at us quickly from all directions these days, this time of
And
year.
surely will be like and sporadically too, never in rhythm, never rhyme or reason. Just
Yeah,
sometimes it's 10 o'clock on
never
Friday
9 to
night.
5, Monday to Friday. That's not our business, but it is their
How much do you
decision
want
to
to bet
make.
we're getting one on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve? I feel
If
pretty
we do, I
confident in
won't
that.
see it, and I won't look at it, and it won't be my problem. How's that?
Sadly, I will, and it will be my problem.
That's I mean, and again, with the way things are with the transfer portal right now too. Is it time for transfer talk, John? Is it
Yeah, I assume we're going to talk here about Julian Fleming, which is fine. I
who?
have yet to watch. Yeah, I know. Whatever.
Who?
I have the yet to watch the all 22 of some Ohio State games next year. If Julian Fleming ultimately commits to Penn State, I plan on doing that, and we will have
So
hopefully
here's
some
the
more in
thing,
depth
right?
stuff. But I do think I want to lay this out there
Mhm.
real quick. I was kidding. I just when we were texting, I even said in our group chat that God forbid someone just
Back
fires off some hot takes for fun
back
in
when
the group
John
chat
was like,
anymore.
"Yeah, I'm not so sure if Penn
Well,
State would
listen,
be interested, if they'd need him."
if we're gonna make the group chat public record, we can make the group chat public record, Audrey. we,
What?
we can do
I
that.
stand by my
Uh,
takes. Um,
but no, I do think like they need to get multiple receivers. Like I said it last time on cursory watching, like Julian Fleming's a really good blocker. Like buying into that is like a really important thing.
mhm.
Uh, and you need
He can
I think
help this room. That's the
he
bottom line. End of the
yes,
day, he can help this room.
I think he's going to help the room if he ends up committing. He's not
Yeah.
committed
Big
yet,
if.
to
We'll
be
see.
clear.
Crystal ball
Um,
was put in by 247, a crystal ball projection to Penn State.
yep.
We'll see.
Does not seem to be going to Nebraska after Kyle McCord is out on
Mhm.
Nebraska, which that was a whole interesting saga there. But no, I think like either way, they need to add two receivers, and if he's one of the two, that's probably going to be pretty helpful. I'm actually looking forward to sitting down and watching this. I just don't want to do it before like
And then
he
if he
commits
ends up
because
not coming here.
the second I sit down and watch 6 games, like full games of him playing, is the second that he commits to like I don't know FIU or something. You know what I mean? Like just a random school
Yeah.
that has nothing to do with my job. But no, I think he would be helpful. I think obviously they had Andre Green Jr. from North Carolina on a
Mhm.
visit. There's been reporting that
And the guy
he
from
will be at
Miami as well,
yeah
right? There's a Miami receiver yesterday, Friday.
yes yes who would I think it will be here this weekend maybe I don't know days are running together.
What
Was
is
at
time?
Yeah, he was at Lackawanna College, which we'll see if that has any impact on anything. Um, but it seems clear that they're going to add multiple receivers, right? And I think that is important because they are clearly losing Christian Driver to the portal. And despite me phrasing it as ambiguity about Keandre Lambert-Smith's status, because to the rest of the world it is ambiguity because it has not been announced, which James for some reason took issue with.
Listen, John, just because it's a surprise to you doesn't mean it's a surprise to those in the building. We don't know
right,
what Keandre
which
Lambert-Smith is going
by
to
the
do.
way,
Penn State
I'm
staff
so
does, but we don't know.
I'm sorry. If
And
you're not
John's a
going to
defense
tell
coach.
us, if you're not going to tell us, then there is ambiguity, right? Like you can't play both sides of this. You can't be like, actually, there's no ambiguity. It's like, okay, then say it, right? Oh, you don't want to? Okay,
You're
then
fired up today, John.
it's
It
early
must be
for
this
me.
special Saturday recording that's got you all
It's,
fired
it's
up.
all that lack of sleep from this entire week. We're running on like 14 total hours over the last 7 days, which is fine. Yeah, it's not good.
Not great. Not great.
But no, I do think they need to make a couple ads at receiver. I assume they will, and once those things come down, you and I will break it down. But I refuse to fully engage on this, other than saying like, yes, I would expect them to get multiple wide receivers.
Yeah, I mean it's the obvious, right? Like this is your weakest position. Excuse me. This is the group you need to target. We saw him bring in 2 guys last year. Your boy Dante Cephas among them. So you gotta, I mean, you just gotta look at it and kind of see where this shakes out. But yeah, if and when that happens, we will go down that rabbit hole if we need to. But early signing period coming up on Wednesday. So
Of course it is.
do not think we'll see any surprises with Penn State there. I asked James Franklin about that on Friday, and he's like, yes, knock on wood. They've been a pretty drama free class, this group, but also like during James Franklin's tenure here, there haven't been many moments where it's been like shock and awe with a recruiting class. So we will have that Wednesday. I know you and I will both be writing about that in the lead up until Wednesday. I've got some feature stories on some prospects that I'm looking forward to. We'll look at the class. We will hear from James Franklin again on Wednesday to specifically discuss the class of 2024. Typically, we hear from the recruiting coordinators on those days as well. Their insights are invaluable to this. So we'll kind of pivot to recruiting, all while continuing to be on Fleming
Right.
watch, all while continuing to be on defensive coordinator watch, all while monitoring the
Preparing for the
portal,
bowl game.
and happy holidays, right? I mean, that's just make sure your Christmas shopping is done between then. Yeah, it's December is a special crazy month. Gosh, yeah, we leave for the bowl game in a little more than a
I
week,
know.
so it is kind of
I was
crazy.
gonna say a lot of credit has to go to my wife for Christmas shopping because I will pitch ideas. Just there is no time to execute them, so she deserves all of the credit for
Yeah,
that.
you're gonna be sitting there on Christmas, John. You're gonna be surprised when people are opening things. You're like, oh yeah, you got
I
her
will.
that. Oh
I'm like,
sure,
oh
great.
yeah, I knew this was gonna be the gift.
Oh yeah.
But no, we've already planned it out, which is nice that we've got the gifts ready to go and ready to roll. But yeah, our travel will be a little longer, a little more chaotic, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Tis the
going to be
season.
5 days out of town, but there is, for fans who are interested, there is a United flight that was created specifically, presumably, for the bowl game. From December 29th is when you leave State College. December 31st is when you get back, direct straight to Atlanta. I know that when I booked my travel, I was looking for direct flights. It makes things so much easier. So for those interested in that, there will be a flight going direct from State College to Atlanta from December 29th to December 31st is the departure and the return date. So love that added level of convenience. Something you and I got when we went to Iowa City. I think it was 2
Yes.
years ago.
I love those direct flights for the away games. It's nice to see that airlines are adding specific ones for away
Yes.
games, for bowl games. I mean, it's fantastic, and it really caters to the people who want to go, right? I mean, this is not, we know State
It's not
College is not an easy
accessible
place to get in and
always.
out of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this always helps. So I think you and I speak for everyone when this is always appreciated, and hopefully places do more stuff like this. Yeah, it's all chaos until between now and then even then, because like I said, I'm sure something will happen on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day that
Don't say that. Do not say that.
interrupts. Listen, it happens. It seems like every year it happens, so we may as well prepare for it now. Between now and then, though, we will probably be back again.
We'll be back Wednesday for sure.
Yeah,
Oh,
Wednesday
well,
for
yeah.
sure, but like I'm
Who
sure
knows?
there's going to be another one
Nittany
mixed in
Dispatch
there.
TBD. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Until further notice, one a week, and then also maybe like another 12 episodes a week, depending on how everything goes. But I think that's a good place to leave it for today. We covered a lot of ground today, as we did yesterday when we were in Beaver Stadium and
all days
in Haluba Hall. So if you want to read Audrey's writing, of course, you can find her at The Athletic. You can find her on Twitter at OddSnyder4. You can find me at centerdaily.com. That's CENTRE, spelled like the county, not the word. And you can find me on Twitter at John Sauber. That's JON with no H, because everything that I am saying is not spelled how you think it is spelled, apparently. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.